Guys, let's shift gears and talk about the opinion polls. We've got these crazy opinion polls that are now coming out of everywhere. Either not showing any movement at all, or the race is tightening and too close to call. Ignore the polls, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Those polls.
We've had opinions were hardened weeks ago. It's like Paul was saying. Trump supporters aren't going to believe anything that comes out, nor are Hillary's supporters. And 26 million, probably even more yesterday, probably closer to 30 now, have been cast. 26 million votes have already been cast in an election that is crazy. You can't look at Hillary being up by 16 or Trump being up by 6 or somebody being up by 2. They're outliers. Trust Harry Enton and Nate Silver over at 538.com, Sam Wang at Princeton and the New York Times, The Upshot. Harry Enton was saying 70 polls a day are coming in and being sourced and looked at, and they go from there.
And of course, one of the problems we have is that polling in America isn't regulated in quite the same way as it is regulated in the UK. And so you get some very dubious sort of polling that goes on just to get the result that they want. And that happens time and time again over in the States. And also the variety of states, state by state changes. And Trump knows he's in trouble. That's why the other day he was calling on people to go in states where they were allowed to change their vote, to go back and change their vote, because he knows that early voting is hurting him. He knows that.
There is no state where one is allowed to go back and change their vote. Let's be very clear.
Well, there are like four states you can do that, where you can go up to 3 times and change your vote. They don't like you to do it. It's a nightmare. But you can actually, there are about 4 states, and I can't remember which ones, where you can go and change your vote if you voted early. And you have to go through all this rigmarole. They don't like it because they have to go down and track your vote and bring it back. But it is actually legal. And that's why Donald Trump was calling it. But it's only like 4 states. None of them are swing states anyway. So it doesn't make a difference. But it is just a bizarre world we live in where Trump is calling on people to do this.
I think, yeah, you're right. That is an indication that he knows he's in trouble. I think, anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And also it goes back to this. I was coming here in the car, and I'm listening to the radio, and they were saying, the polls are neck and neck or something, and I think it plays into what you were talking about, that a lot of the media want a horse race.
Yesterday was a very big day. Yesterday was the first time a lot of the state polls came out, and a lot of the other polls came out for the first time since the revelation of the emails last Friday. And, I'll say what I've said all along. The polls that they conduct, the national tracking polls, are meaningless. The only polls that matter are the state-by-state polls, because that's the way in which everybody votes. And
what did they show then?
270. No change. No change.
So Hillary's out in
Hillary's
front
still by about 6 points to 8 points, depending on where you go, which is outside the margin of error.
And that's after the emails.
It's after the emails has been factored in. And, Hillary's built a very unique and unusual early voting firewall in both the South and the West, and particularly with GOP women. Now, yesterday, traditional GOP members do not want anything to do with Trump, traditional Republicans. I had lunch yesterday with a woman from Texas whose parents are by no means outliers. They have voted Republican their entire life. They are solid, staunch Republicans, and they are both voting for Hillary because Trump scares them. And there are a lot of people like that. And I'm convinced there's almost a massive Nixonian silent majority of women out there who are going to do the same. They get into the sanctity of the voting booth, and even though they'll parrot what their man says, they're going to sit there and they're going to say, no, I cannot stand who this Donald Trump is for his misogyny and his attacks.
So you're still confident?
I think that's true, and I wonder if we go back a few years ago, back in the UK, we had this sort of hidden conservative vote where when it came to polling, certain people weren't willing to admit they were conservatives, and it obviously swung the polls, and polling companies had to change how they calculated things. I do wonder if there is an element of the Republican vote which is the same. That if you ask them in public if they are going to vote Republican, they would never ever admit to voting Democrat. Yet when you get in that voting booth, the fear of a Trump presidency and what that could do to the world and America, I think will shift enough of those over to Democrat. Some of those will go to third parties, although they've pretty much collapsed during this election. Their support has gone down, and counter to what I said last time I was in this podcast. And I will admit I was wrong. But I do think you're going to see that quiet Republican vote shifting over to Democrats. Never do it in public, never admit it in public. You're in that voting booth where that mark goes.
It is hard for them. I mean, I can understand, some of the issues, and we'll talk about that in just a second.